Well, welcome to every edition of the Tabletop RPG Talk Show. This is our
Session 0.
Session 0. Here we are. We're doing 0 level characters right now.
Session 0s are very important.
Yeah.
And I'm sure at some point in the future we'll talk about it.
Yes, absolutely. You got to roll up your characters. So we'll roll up our characters today. So I'm Jon.
I'm Jesse.
And I guess I'll tell you a little bit about our background. So I'm the old guy. I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons since the late 80s, believe it or not. I started off.
That was a long time.
It was a long time, yeah. I started off as a small child, watching my dad's D&D group in the late 70s, early 80s, and then made my way to the table right around the transition between first and second edition. Played a lot of second edition as a preteen and teenager. Transitioned to third edition. Moved to Pathfinder after that. Did not ever do fourth edition. Sorry, everybody. And then went on to fifth edition. And I've also, recently been happily discovering the old school Renaissance and kind of getting back into older editions of the world's greatest tabletop role playing game. So that's me. I've played it all pretty much.
I'm Jesse. I'm very much a newer player. I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons. I played, I think, one session of 3.5. I missed all of fourth, and I really started in fifth edition. And basically, since the beginning, I've been DMing. So I'm the new guy. I've got very little in the way of knowledge of previous editions, but I've been DMing for 6 years. I've been DMing for hire for a little over 2 now at this point. I have a deep background in Magic the Gathering and sort of the professional side of things. So I'm excited to have conversations about not just the new stuff, but new stuff that's coming out, but also older versions of tabletop gaming. So it doesn't need to be, I guess, just Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, and I guess as the name suggests, with every edition, we don't want to limit ourselves to talking about just 5th edition or just Dungeon Crawl Classics or just Castles and Crusades or just White Box or just 4th edition or 3rd edition or 3.5. We want to just, talk about what we want to talk about.
Yeah.
I love reading role-playing books. I love collecting role-playing books. I love playing role-playing games. And I just want to share that love without bounds. Like I honestly, I kind of love it all. So I'm just excited to help people also love this hobby and think about some of the best ways to play, the best ways to game master, to dungeon master. Just share the love.
I think it's particularly interesting from a new player's perspective. I say new, 6 years isn't really that new, but I guess in the whole scheme of Dungeons and Dragons being like 40 years old or something, is pretty new. Being able to see back through the history of the game and look at other editions of other games and their histories, like particularly Cyberpunk. I'm very interested in the tabletop Cyberpunk, and looking at the changes that were made in those editions. You can kind of, I'm like also along for the ride kind of deal with the history stuff. And I think there's a lot to glean from previous editions of things to make the current games even better.
Yeah, and the truth is there's never been a better time to be interested in the hobby of tabletop role-playing games than right now, in 2021.
There's so much.
And it's all readily available. Whatever game you want to try, it's in print. Like even through, thankfully, thankfully even through retro clones and things like that. Like if you want to try an older edition of Dungeons and Dragons, it is in print. And the DMs Guild, has
That's where I spend a lot of my time.
Yeah, right. So it's an incredible time to be a fan of this hobby, and there's decades now of material to mine. And there's, obviously there's new stuff coming out all the time. And, one of the things that I'm most excited about is independent role-playing games and third-party contributions to this hobby, because it's so robust. And it reminds me, it's like being a role-playing game fan today is kind of like being a fan of punk rock or independent music or something like that. Like, everybody's going to get the latest Green Day album and have an opinion on it. But, then you've also got your Ergs and you got your, and then you've got the Ramones and like, right. So all the different levels of familiarity, but then also just sort of indie bands and even to the point where like today, the wonderful world of role-playing zines. I can't wait to explore that on this show. It's so reminiscent to me of being a punk rock fan in the early 90s and reading about different bands and stuff like that. But now it's like, getting that new spell or that new monster or that, that little,
it's exciting.
Yeah, it's great. And it's so useful and so much fun. So there's just, when I'm not playing role-playing games, I'm reading role-playing games and role-playing material. And it's my favorite form of literature, I guess. I don't know I don't know what else to say. I'm a collector, but I'm also an avid reader of everything role-playing. The parallels between music and being a music fan and being a role-playing fan, like
I never saw that. Before you started to mention it, I never saw that. Truthfully, I'm not, the deepest, music head.
Yeah.
But I can definitely see that there are parallels there.
And it's normal, like, role-playing games and popular music, right? Like I feel like Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons and Dragons are Green Day. Right?
Yeah. It's sort of mainstream, but like good.
And everybody's got an opinion on Green Day, and everybody's got an opinion on their new album, and everybody's at least heard Green Day, know who they are, familiar with them. If they were playing in your backyard, it would be a big deal, right? You know what I mean? Like, and it's not like a surprise when their songs come on the radio or anything like that. They're familiar, right? But then there's so many punk bands, right? And just so much independent music, and they're all of that ilk, right? But
Green Day gets all the spotlight.
So Jesse, you're the token noob, right?
I am the noob.
So, but that all that means is like at this point, maybe you've discovered Green Day, and now you're like, hey, what is this punk rock thing? Like, can you tell me more? And I'm the old guy who's like, I remember seeing the Ramones at CBGB's, right? I'm the grognard who, has played, since AD&D. But the truth is, like, I also love Green Day. I also love Fifth Edition. Like, I think it's it's brought so many people to the hobby that how could I hate it, right? I'm not trying to keep people out, right? I'm not a gatekeeper. The more people that are into this hobby, the more great products that are going to be made, the more things I'll have to read.
And I think like things like the DM's Guild and like Dungeon Crawl Classics, this sort of third-party stuff, kind of harkens back to what I was talking about trying to glean as much good stuff from every edition that you can of every game that you can to improve your game and improve your players' games or the people around you. Or even if you decide to write your own book, to improve that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and like Goodman, I'm going to keep running with this analogy here. Goodman Games, the makers of Dungeon Crawl Classics, they're the equivalent of like Epitaph Records or Fat Records if you're into punk rock, right? So they put out that band that if you're into Green Day, and then you've probably heard of Bad Religion, right? Yeah. Or you've probably heard of NoFX, right? And if you're into punk rock, like they also sort of feel basically mainstream, or like, they're selling out clubs and stuff like that. Dungeon Crawl Classics is super popular. It's got the names of artists and authors that I've been familiar with for decades. And it's fantastic. But then the support that then like Dungeon Crawl Classics has from third parties and the zines and stuff, just unbelievable creative people out there putting out support for these indie projects. Like I started backing this one. We'll talk about it in another episode probably, but there's a game called Old School Essentials.
Oh yeah,
that is, It's the BX right here's Back to Basics here on the screen. It's a retro clone of BX Dungeons and Dragons, of Basic and Expert Dungeons and Dragons from 1981, and it's great. It's fantastic. It's so much more readable, right, than the original.
The original stuff's like a little tricky to get through. It's flowery. Gygaxian, whatever word you want to use.
And that stuff has its place, but like I'm so glad that somebody's gone back and cleaned up the rules and made it more accessible. But there's this new zine that's out. It's called Delorr. Here, I'll hold it up here.
That's what that was.
Delorr. Okay. We'll maybe talk about it more in another.
That could be a
episode.
Good talk about zines in general, like Dragon Magazine and whatnot.
Yes, so that's it. Like Dragon Magazine was like your Rolling Stone.
Yeah, that was
right?
the Rolling Stone.
But then there's Maximum Rock and Roll. Like I can't like the analogy really works. Like there's just but anyway, like this creator of Delorr, his name is James Floyd Kelly. And he's just putting out a really high quality first issue, supporting Old School Essentials, and it's one of the ways I like to play, which is lots of tables, lots of random rolling tables, right? And so that's all.
Roll some dice,
and that's all the zine is, right? It's just lots of tables. It's great. So I do think like this could be the whatever we're spotlighting. I like the idea of having, first of all, a visual focal, but also then whatever we're spotlighting as the like loot the room segment. And there's always going to be like, I guess it's a little bit like elementary school show and tell. Like I do want to like be like, hey, check out this new cool thing I got. You know what I mean? Like
show and tell's great.
Yeah. So I'm an avid reader and collector of role-playing books. So like I've always got something new that I'm reading and that I would love to share. And sometimes it's something that's like hot off the press, and sometimes it's something older, something from the past. So.
Like a new book. You were looking at getting that Mind Flayer book.
Oh,
it was like $90.
I don't know if I could do it. I don't know if I could do it.
It's a lot. I've never seen that book.
$90 for a third edition book. That's highway robbery. Like I can't.
And they're not in print anymore.
I can't.
And they look good.
It's great. I don't know. I just because Dungeons and Dragons is so hot right now, it does mean that there's a premium on older products that aren't that right. So it's harder. In some ways, it's harder to be a collector right now because the prices have gone up. The flip of that, though, is like the DM's Guild, right? So when they have something that's available in print, and you're not paying an arm and a leg, you're paying like a normal,
like $25,
$20, $25, $30, sometimes $40 if it's a hardcover.
Sure.
And sometimes $60 if it's like a new like they have an Eberron book that's a hardcover Eberron book that's put out by the creator of Eberron. That's like, quasi, official.
Sure.
And so he knows he can charge $60 because there's a lot of Eberron fans out there, right? Yeah. So why not? Like, yeah, I get it.
That's pretty
but
good.
It's simultaneously an amazing time to be a fan, but it's not maybe a great time to be a collector. How's that?
Yeah. I think that's apt.
So, but that's all right. Like I'm not into this for collecting. I'm into it because I want to play.
You want to sit down at the table and play.
Yeah, I want to play. Back to Basics was a zine that came out, 10 issues, and it's all collected in this right here, right? The Back to Basics
that's all
book.
Of it in one.
All 10 issues in one spot. I backed it on Kickstarter. It's fantastic. They're uncut, right? So it's got interviews with some of the creators of the basic and expert versions of Dungeons and Dragons, so you get kind of that on the ground feel of like how the game was created. where it came from. And then it's always got an adventure at the end. And the adventure uses unique magic items and monsters. And so you got those in there too. Nice. It's wonderful. I ran the first adventure in there for my family using old school essentials.
That's where that snake was it?
Exactly.
Snake?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So in the first issue, the monsters are winged snake people. So I ran that for my family, and it was great, and it was a good introduction to them to old school essentials, to the basic and expert rules of the game, and they hold up. They're great. It's a fantastic way to play D&D. Especially I loved my daughter playing the rogue.
That was so good. Yeah.
So I told you about this. She it was her first time playing a rogue, and the first time you play a rogue, man, I think you should have backstab. I don't know, like that's just how and so having
backstab's like not really a thing.
Yeah, it's
at least a 5th edition.
Having an 8-year-old be like, I'm gonna backstab. It's like, ooh, all right, let's go. So it's fun. So I highly recommend if you can find this Back to BasiX collection of the first 10 issues of the Back to BasiX zine. It's really excellent. And rumor has it this has gotten enough attention or enough excitement amongst folk that they're actually going to make an 11th issue.
Oh,
so
definitely continue.
Definitely get a hold of that if it comes out.